Walk out to your tomato bed tomorrow morning. Look at the lower leaves, the older leaves near the bottom of the plant. If you notice something unusual, yellow fading between the veins while the veins themselves remain dark green, stop right there. That is not heat damage. That is not old age. That is not some strange mystery disease. That is your tomato plant speaking to you in the only language it knows, asking for one very specific mineral. The $40 bottle sitting in your garage will not fix it. The shiny bag of tomato fertilizer with the cartoon tomato printed on the label will not fix it either. But a simple white powder sitting on the bottom shelf of almost every pharmacy in America for around $2 can turn those leaves deep green again in less than a week. And here is the part that should make you angry, or at least make you curious. The reason you have almost never heard this from a garden center employee has very little to do with science, and almost everything to do with what can be put on a label, branded and trademarked. Welcome to Rooted Grace. Pull up a chair. 1. The yellow warning sign you probably already have. That yellowing pattern between the veins has a name. Botanists call it interveinal chlorosis. Once you notice it for the first time, you will never stop seeing it. You will spot it in your own garden beds, in your neighbor's roses, in citrus trees, even in the landscaping at grocery store parking lots. It is everywhere. But here is what most people miss. It almost always begins on the older leaves first, the ones close to the soil. The veins themselves stay green, almost stubbornly, but the tissue between them turns pale, weak, and sickly yellow. Sometimes the edges even begin to brown. The plant may keep growing upward as if nothing is happening, but the lower canopy slowly starts thinning out. Tomatoes come in smaller. Pepper plants set fewer fruits. Roses push thinner canes and produce fewer flowers. And by the time the upper leaves begin turning yellow too, your entire season is already in danger. Dr. Neil Matson at Cornell University explains it about as clearly as anyone can. If the older leaves turn yellow between the veins, while the veins remain green, the plant is lacking magnesium. If all the leaves begin yellowing at the same time, from top to bottom, the plant is short on sulfur. Either way, the missing nutrient is not part of the famous trio everyone talks about. Not nitrogen, not phosphorus, not potassium. None of the three nutrients printed in big numbers on those bright fertilizer bags that line every garden center wall. The problem is in two quiet minerals that most commercial fertilizers do not replace in any meaningful amount. And if you have been gardening in the same plot for 10, 20, or even 30 years, that matters more to you than almost anyone else. Think about what has really been happening in your soil all those years. Tomatoes coming out every August, peppers every September, compost going in whenever you have time. The same blue liquid feed being poured on when the bottle happens to be on sale, year after year after year. Magnesium and sulfur leave the soil with every harvest you pull out. Meanwhile, the bagged fertilizer keeps putting back mostly the same 3 macronutrients. At some point, the math no longer works. Your soil becomes rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but nearly bankrupt in the 2 minerals that actually help run the engine. Your plants do not necessarily die. They simply stop performing the way they once did. And you stand there confused, scratching your head, wondering what happened to the beautiful garden you had 10 years ago. The truth is, nobody tells you. Instead, they sell you a more expensive bottle of the wrong thing. So let me show you the missing piece. And the story begins 400 years ago, during a drought, with one of the strangest origins of any gardening secret you have ever heard. 2. The cows that refused to drink, Surrey, England. The summer of 1618 was brutal across southern England. Surrey, the county just southwest of London, had gone weeks with almost no real rain. Pastures cracked open, streams shrank down to thin trickles. Cattle grew thin, restless and irritable. A farmer named Henry Wicker was walking his herd across a common field outside the small market town of Epsom when he noticed something he could not explain. There was a small natural spring still flowing in the middle of the dry field, and his cattle, half dying of thirst, kept refusing to drink from it. Curious, Wicker bent down and tasted the water himself. It was sharp, bitter, almost medicinal. So he understood why the cows wanted nothing to do with it. But that was not the thing that stopped him in his tracks. The truly strange part was the grass. Everywhere else in that field, the ground was brown, dry and brittle. But within a few feet of that bitter spring, in the middle of one of the worst droughts anyone could remember, the grass was thick, dark green, and standing tall. Wicker did what any sensible farmer of his era would have done. He took the water to a local apothecary. The apothecary boiled it down until small white crystals settled at the bottom of the pan. The substance turned out to be a salt made from two minerals, magnesium and sulfur. The town gave it its name. Epsom salt entered history. Within a single generation, farmers across Surrey and Kent were dissolving those crystals in well water and applying them to their wheat and barley fields before planting. The reports passed from one country lane to another were remarkably consistent. Seeds came up faster, roots pushed deeper, leaves turned darker, yields increased. The wisdom moved by word of mouth through generations of English smallholders. It crossed the Atlantic with the colonists. It found its way into American kitchen gardens by the late 1700s. And for the next 200 years, it became a quiet part of country gardening. But nobody could fully explain why it worked. The chemists of 1618 simply did not have the tools. It would take another 3 centuries. And a brilliant chemist working inside a laboratory in Berlin on the eve of the First World War to finally uncover the secret. And when he did, it earned him the Nobel Prize. 3. The Nobel Prize that unlocked the green leaf. Here is the story almost no gardener has ever been told. In 1817, 2 French chemists named Joseph Pelletier and Joseph Caventou isolated the green pigment that gives every leaf its color. They named it chlorophyll, from the Greek words for green and leaf. For almost 90 years after that, nobody could fully explain what that molecule was actually made of. Then, in 1906, a careful chemical analysis revealed something no one expected. Inside every chlorophyll molecule was one single atom of magnesium. Most chemists at the time assumed it had to be a mistake, a contamination from the glassware in the laboratory. Magnesium had no business sitting at the center of a green plant pigment. The samples, they believed, must have been impure. The man who proved them wrong was a German chemist named Richard Willstätter. Working at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute, through years of painstaking work, extractions, purifications, recrystallizations, Willstätter showed that magnesium was not a contaminant at all. It was the structural keystone of the chlorophyll molecule itself. Held in place by 4 nitrogen atoms in a precise arrangement, almost the same way iron sits inside human hemoglobin. In 1915, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences awarded him the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for that discovery. Now think about what that actually means for your garden. Without magnesium, chlorophyll cannot exist in its working form. Without working chlorophyll, Photosynthesis cannot happen. Without photosynthesis, the plant cannot make sugars. Without sugars, it cannot build cell walls. It cannot set fruit. It cannot push out flowers. Your tomato plant can be drowning in nitrogen, swimming in phosphorus, and covered with potassium, and still slowly fade from the bottom up if its magnesium runs low. The entire engine simply begins to misfire. And sulfur, the second mineral in Epsom salt, does something completely different, but just as important. Sulfur activates the enzymes that allow plants to turn nitrogen into amino acids. And amino acids are what every plant protein is built from. Imagine bags of groceries sitting on your front porch. Nitrogen is the groceries. Sulfur is the key to the front door. Without sulfur, the groceries just sit there. The plant cannot use them. So that bitter spring in Epsom 400 years ago was not some vague, mystical tonic. It was delivering, in pure mineral form, the two exact atoms a green plant needs to keep its engine running. Henry Wicker did not know any of this in 1618. The cows did not know it either. The grass simply turned dark green and stood tall in the middle of the drought, because the two minerals it had been starving for had suddenly become available. Once you understand that, you understand why a $2 bag of Epsom salt can sometimes do what a $40 bottle of branded fertilizer cannot. The branded fertilizer is feeding the plant more of what it already has. The Epsom salt is giving it what it has actually been missing. Before we go any further, here is something that will make this easier for you. Everything you are about to hear, the exact dosages for tomatoes, peppers, roses, citrus and azaleas, the 3-application schedule for the early growing season, the soil test cheat sheet that tells you whether your garden truly needs this, and the printable monthly calendar you can stick on the fridge. All of it has been put together into one detailed PDF blueprint. Free, no email sign-up, no catch. If you look at the bottom right corner of the screen right now, you will see a QR code. Just open the camera app on your phone, point it at the code, and tap the link that appears. The PDF will download straight to your phone or tablet, ready to print whenever you want. Print it out. Take it into the garden with you. Tape it inside the door of your garden shed. That way, you do not have to remember every number from this video. Now let's get back to the garden, because the next part is where this becomes practical. 5. How to actually use this step by step. This is the part most YouTube videos rush through. Do not rush this section. Because the difference between Epsom salt that transforms a garden and Epsom salt that does absolutely nothing often comes down to a few small details most people get wrong. First, where to buy it. Skip the garden centre completely. Walk into any pharmacy or grocery store and look for a plain 10-pound bag labelled magnesium sulfate USP grade. Check the ingredient list. It should say magnesium sulfate and nothing else. No lavender, no eucalyptus, no soothing scent. Those additives may be fine for soaking tired feet, but they can burn plant tissue. A plain 10-pound bag usually costs around $8 and will last most home gardens through an entire growing season. There are 2 ways to apply it. Both work, and they work best when you use them together. The first method is the foliar spray. This is the fast-acting one. Dissolve 1 level teaspoon of Epsom salt into 1 gallon of room temperature water. Stir it until the water turns clear and you cannot see crystals sitting at the bottom. Pour it into a clean spray bottle or a hand pump pressure sprayer. Now this is where timing matters. Spray early in the morning before the sun gets high. or spray in the cool evening after sundown. Never spray under the midday sun. Wet leaves in direct sunlight can scorch. Mist the tops and undersides of the leaves until they are lightly coated, not dripping wet. The magnesium absorbs directly through the leaf surface within hours. On a tomato or pepper plant showing that yellow interveinal pattern, you can usually see the green color begin returning in 5 to 7 days. The second method is the root drench. This one is slower but deeper. Dissolve 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt, 3 times the foliar amount, into 1 gallon of water. Pour it at the base of the plant, right where the stem meets the soil. For heavy feeders during early growth, do this once a month. Once flowers appear, do it once every 2 weeks. The minerals slowly soak down into the root zone and remain available to the plant for the next 10 to 14 days. For tomatoes, listen carefully here, because this is the schedule that actually makes the difference. Apply the foliar spray 3 times during the early season. The first time when you transplant the seedling into the bed. The second time when the first flowers open. The third time when the early tomatoes are about the size of marbles. 3 applications are enough to carry most tomato plants through a full harvest, even in tired soil. For roses, there is a method that has been shared around the master gardener community for decades. It comes from Linda Cobb, a long-time master gardener and television garden host in Spartanburg, South Carolina. In early spring, just as the canes begin breaking dormancy, scratch about half a cup of dry Epsom salt into the soil around the base of each established rose bush. The spring rains will slowly release the minerals down into the root zone. And Linda Cobb's roses, by the way, are the kind of roses that make tourists stop their cars on the side of the road. For peppers, follow the National Gardening Association protocol. 1 tablespoon per gallon as a foliar spray at first bloom. Then a second application 10 days later. That is it. Spraying more often will not produce bigger peppers. The studies are clear about this. There is a ceiling, and once you go beyond it, there is no extra benefit. For citrus trees in containers, and if you have a lemon tree sitting on the back porch, you know exactly what I mean. Magnesium leaks out through those drainage holes every single time you water. A monthly root drench at 1 tablespoon per gallon helps prevent the yellow leaf problem that frustrates so many backyard citrus growers. One more rule matters more than almost all the others. 2 teaspoons in a gallon do not work twice as well as 1. Too much magnesium begins blocking calcium and other nutrients from entering the plant. You start by solving one problem, then create 2 more. So stick with the doses above. Those are the amounts that 400 years of practical use and a century of laboratory work have settled on. 6. The 3 things you need to stop believing. Now for the honest part. There are 3 ideas floating around the internet about Epsom salt that are simply wrong, and if you act on them, you can damage your garden instead of helping it. First, and this one is everywhere, Epsom salt does not cure blossom end rot in tomatoes. You know the problem. The bottom of the tomato turns dark, sunken, and ruined. A fruit that should have been beautiful becomes wasted. Half the gardening forums online will tell you to grab the Epsom salt. They are wrong. Blossom end rot is caused by a calcium shortage, not a magnesium shortage. And here is the brutal part. Because magnesium and calcium compete for the same uptake pathways in the plant's roots, adding more magnesium to a calcium-starved plant can actually make the rot worse, not better. If you see blossom end rot, the answer is consistent watering and a calcium source. Crushed eggshells worked into the soil, gypsum, or bone meal. not Epsom salt. Never Epsom salt. Second, Epsom salt does not speed up seed germination. Healthy seeds already carry their own internal mineral reserves. They sprout with water and warmth. That is all they need. Soaking seeds in an Epsom salt solution does not help. And in concentrated doses, it can actually slow germination by pulling water away from the seed coat. Third, and this one hurts to say, if your soil already contains enough magnesium and sulfur, Epsom salt will do nothing measurable for your garden. Studies at Auburn University and Delaware Valley College have made this clear. Dr. Linda Chalker Scott at Washington State University has been explaining this for years. Epsom salt reverses a deficiency. If there is no deficiency, there is nothing to reverse. So before you go to the pharmacy, take $15 and a soil sample to your county extension office. Every county in the United States has one. That is what your tax dollars pay for. They will test your soil and tell you, in writing, exactly which minerals your soil is lacking. That $15 test may be the smartest gardening investment you make all year. If the report comes back showing low magnesium, then this video just paid for itself 10 times over. If the report comes back showing your magnesium levels are fine, then you have saved yourself from chasing a problem you do not even have. That is what trustworthy gardening advice sounds like. Not, this miracle works on everything, but here is what it actually does. Here is when it works. And here is how to know whether it applies to you. 7. Why you have never heard this before. So here is the question worth ending on. If Henry Wicker stumbled onto this in 1618, and Richard Willstätter won a Nobel Prize explaining it in 1915, and the National Gardening Association has been testing it for decades, why is this not sitting on every front shelf of every garden center in America? Why are you hearing about it for the first time at your age from a stranger on YouTube? The answer is not a conspiracy. It is simpler than that, and honestly, it is more interesting. After the Second World War ended, the United States government found itself with 10 massive ammonium nitrate plants, including the famous Muscle Shoals facility in Alabama. Those plants had originally been built to manufacture munitions for the war effort. In 1947, those plants were converted from making explosives to making fertilizer. The output was nitrogen-based. The manufacturing processes were proprietary, and the products could be branded. A company could put its own name on a particular ratio of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It could register a trademark, buy magazine ads, pay for 30-second television commercials. The product had a moat around it. Magnesium sulfate is the complete opposite. It is a pure mineral compound, identical no matter whose bag it comes in. Nothing to patent, nothing to trademark. No marketing department on earth wants to spend money promoting a product that every competitor can sell for the exact same price. So the marketing dollars went where the marketing dollars could earn a return. The bright bottles and branded blends took over the front shelves. The plain white pharmacy salt. The actual answer to the actual problem many home gardens have stayed quietly in the back of the store. 2 generations of American gardeners walked right past it on their way to spend $40 on something that did not address what their soil was really missing. That is not suppression. That is just how money moves. But once you understand how money moves, you can walk into the pharmacy this weekend, pay $2, and step around the whole game. Conclusion. 400 years ago, a thirsty cow refused a bitter drink, and a quiet English farmer paid attention to a patch of dark green grass. 300 years later, a German chemist proved exactly why that grass was so green and won a Nobel Prize for the discovery. And tonight, at your kitchen table, that same plain mineral they were both looking at is sitting on a pharmacy shelf 2 miles from your front door, available for the price of a sandwich. The garden has always been patient. It has been waiting for you to notice. So this weekend, before the next bag of branded fertilizer goes into your cart, take a slow walk through your beds. Check those lower tomato leaves. Look closely at the rose canes. Ask one simple question. Is the engine running on empty? If the answer is yes, you now know exactly what to do. Subscribe to Rooted Grace if you want more gardening wisdom that gets out of the way of the truth. Share this with a friend who is still spending real money on the wrong bottle. Scan the QR code on the screen for the free PDF blueprint so you can do this without remembering a single number. Keep your hands in the dirt. Keep your heart full of grace. And another old secret will be waiting in the next video.